Rev up your engines!
Well, now some U.S. businesses are suing to block Trump tariffs because they said the trade deficits are not an emergency. He's using presidential powers of an emergency to put tariffs on. And they do have a point, because is it really an emergency? What do you call an emergency? And only by calling them an emergency does he have the right to do it. Kind of reminds me about years ago in Texas when they did that National 55 and Sammy Hagar made the song, I Can't Drive 55. Right? People in Texas sued, and they won because they said 55 miles an hour to save gasoline, because you get better gas mileage at speed like that than you do going 80 or 90. But they said you have no right to have anything to do with air pollution. Car safety has nothing to do with air pollution, and they won, and then they put the speed limit back up to 75 miles an hour. So, hey, these guys might have a point. Is it actually an emergency, right? I mean, of course, what is an emergency? You start getting into lawyers and legalese, they'll be arguing it for the next 1,000 years, right? But they got a point. It may not be an emergency, but he's using emergency powers. And a lot of these are kind of based on wartime stuff, too. And, hey, presently at least, we're not directly in a war, you know? We supply a lot of stuff to Ukraine, but we don't have boots on the ground, as far as most people know. We don't have any officially declared war, so a lot of this stuff is kind of skirting the issue, perhaps going over the line that you're not supposed to go over, and these businesses are suing. Well, a pricing dispute at General Motors is threatening to shut down their most profitable vehicles, their trucks, right? Well, what's this about? Well, GM has no one to blame but themselves, because unlike Henry Ford, when he started his company, he had total integration, where he even made his own windshields. GM decides, oh, we'll have things made somewhere else. It's cheaper to do it that way. Who cares about the quality, right? Well, there's now a dispute between GM and one of its key suppliers, which is called Nexteer, and it can halt the production of their full-size pickups. The issue is a legal battle between Nexteer and Premax, which is another supplier, over raw material costs. It's so bad that they're not even buying stuff from someone who makes it themselves. Those people are also getting stuff from somebody else and making the product and then selling it to GM. They have such a long chain of supplies going all over the place. In the case of GM, a lot of it's all over the world, that you get on the other side of the planet doesn't supply what company Y does, then Y can't give the parts to GM to make their trucks. You remember during coronavirus, they didn't have enough chips because the chips came from overseas and stuff, right? They didn't have enough chips, so then they sold trucks that didn't have things that worked on them because they couldn't get the fancy chips. They put in cheaper chips, and then later they said they're going to upgrade them, right? Well, this is even a bigger deal. Now, Premax, the company, they make tie rods. Tie rods are what steer your vehicle. Without tie rods, you can't steer it, so they can't make the vehicles. So it just goes to show that these companies, they created their own mess. They decided to farm things out because it's cheaper. Look at Ford. All those Broncos, the V6 engines are blowing up because they have bad valves. Did Ford make the valves for the engine? No. I think it was some company in Ohio or something. It's another company that made it. Instead of them having quality control, making it themselves, well, it costs too much money to make these valves ourselves, so these other guys make it. Yeah, and then they screw up, and Ford gets egg in their face for all these engines blowing up. Well, GM might not be able to build these things until these people settle their disagreement. And of course, since everything costs more now, this company like Premax, hey, if they're making these tie rod parts for the other company that supplies GM, a high cost that they're actually losing money making them, guess what? The company's going to go bankrupt, then they won't have any tie rods at all. So, hey, on you, that's what I got to say. While Mary Barr is dancing around getting her $29.5 million salary with bonuses for a company that went from $10 billion to $6 billion profit in the last year, but her salary went up. And it's supposed to be based on, she did a good job. Obviously not. They're not doing a good job at sourcing their parts for their cars either. Well, if you follow me on like the time, I don't like those CVT transmissions, at least the normal ones with drums and belts and chains. The eCVTs, electric CVTs, are another story. The plain Jane CVTs, I'm not a fan. Here's 10 Toyota models that don't have a CVT that you can still buy today. Brand new ones. Toyota 4Runner, you can 8-speed automatic in that. Toyota Highlander, Toyota Grand Highlander, the Toyota GR Supra, which of course is a rear-wheel drive car. The Toyota GR Yaris, not the regular Yaris, they're all CVTs, right? Toyota RAV4. If you get the conventional Toyota RAV4, it gets an automatic transmission. Now, if you buy a hybrid, it has an eCVT, but like I said, they have actual gears, and Toyota knows how to make them. They've been using that design in Prius for decades, and they've got it down pat. Also, the Toyota Land Cruiser, the Toyota Tacoma, the truck, the Toyota Tundra, the Toyota Mirai too, but that's that hydrogen car. Oh, let's face the facts. Who the heck is buying those hydrogen cars? The people that bought them in California are now suing Toyota, saying, hey, you sold us cars, now we can't get fuel for them, because Shell had a bunch of hydrogen fuel stations. Shell shut them all down, said, it's not worth our bother to put all the money into this stuff. We're not making any money. Forget that. And they shut them down. So now they got cars that are really hard to fuel up. But they do have transmissions in them that aren't CVTs. Well, Mazda's at it again with rotary engines. They just won't give up, right? Mazda says they have a new rotary engine that, in quotes, is feasible for production. Now, instead of having one rotor, it's going to have two. The reason they stopped making them was because they couldn't meet first the European emissions and then the American emissions, because the rotary engines are relatively inefficient. They put out a lot of power for their weight, tremendous power for weight. They're almost like a turbine engine that doesn't weigh much but puts out a ton of horsepower. But the turbines do it by going by hundreds of thousands of RPMs. The Mazda rotary was just like a normal engine in terms of RPMs. It wasn't insanely 100,000 RPMs or anything, right? But for various reasons, they burned oil, they couldn't get the apex seals right, and they didn't get very good gas mileage, so they can't meet any kind of federal standards. But now Mazda says they got a two-rotor system that would be able to pass the emissions, and they say that it's feasible for production. Well, as far as I'm concerned, feasible and being produced are two opposite things. Well, we could do this, but we're not going to. It's feasible that my 3-year-old is going to stop whining, but is it going to happen? Probably not, right? Rotary engines have been around for so long, and they have failed in every single application, from cars to motorcycles to generators. It would make your head spin, right? People want power and efficiency. Rotary engines are great for power. Efficiency, not so much. And they also didn't last all that long either, because the way they spun, the way that they'd wear out. The apex seals would go bad. The inside gears would go bad. It's just kind of a disaster. And the fact that they have a new one that's feasible for production, I wouldn't hold my breath. So they're going to come out and sell it. And of course, what are they saying? They're saying, well, if we do produce it, it's going to be in a brand new sports car. Hardly anybody's buying sports cars. So maybe they'll make a handful of these things. But it's not going to be something the average Joe's going to be driving around. Well, finally, Mazda is going to put a bigger engine in the next Miata. They've always had little bitty tiny 4-cylinder engines. They're fun to drive, no race cars. But now they say they're going to put in their 2.5 liter Skyactiv 4-cylinder engine. 2.5 liters, a decent size. Some of these companies are putting 1.1 liter tiny ones, right? They get about 190 horsepower, 187 in the one that they have now. And if they put in this 2.5 and turbocharge it, they'll get 250 horsepower. So it's a big deal. 187 to 250, right? They'll be zippier, and they're still going to sell the manual transmissions. You can get an automatic if you want. I don't advise it with a Mazda Miata. They're a lot more fun to drive with the manual, and they're so smooth to shift on the floor with soft clutches. Anybody who already knows how to drive can learn how to drive them. But they're not going to make an electric one, at least not yet. And I think they've wised up. They kept talking, oh, we'll make the cute little Mazda electric. Ha! Their sales would go down the toilet. It's hard enough to sell a 2-seater roadster to begin with, right? And Mazda's done a great job. They're the only 2-seat roadster in the world that sold millions. Nobody ever sold that many of 2-seat roadsters. Why ruin a good thing? And I think it's great that they're putting a 2.5 liter, a little bit bigger engine in it, so it'll have more instead of just having a tiny engine and putting 2 turbos on it and it would blow up. The Mazda Miatas always had a pretty good track record for strong engines, aside from the early ones that had some casting problems in the heads and they had the engine problem, but that was decades ago. They've been very reliable vehicles, and with the 2.5 liter engine, it'd be a lot more fun to drive. Well, if you're looking for a new convertible, the Mazda Miata and the Mustangs are really the only last affordable convertibles you can buy. And by affordable convertibles, I mean under $50,000. And if you're talking Mustang, it's only the 4-cylinder EcoBoost engine that I don't like. The V8s cost over $50,000. But the Miatas are under $50,000. Now, you're thinking, well, those are completely different cars. A little Mazda Miata, a big old Mustang, right? Well, there's more in common than you might think. For a matter of fact, they both have four-cylinder engines for under 50 grand, right? Now, the Mazda's got a smaller engine, although they say they're going to put a 2.5-liter engine in it, but it doesn't put out near the horsepower that the Mustang. For example, the 2.3-liter turbocharged Mustang puts out 315 horsepower, where the 2-liter four-cylinder 8-speed manual Mazda, hey, it puts out 181 horsepower, so you're comparing apples to oranges there. Yes, they're both ragtop convertibles, but one's got 315 horsepower, the other has 181. But the Mazdas have their fan base. Let's face it, they got their fan base. And the Mustangs have their fan base, and people are still buying them. You know, not to the extent that they used to. Both of them had their better days decades ago, because a lot of people aren't buying convertibles and they're not buying smaller cars. They want a family SUV or a truck, which is a completely different vehicle. But those are about the only two left. And when they say they're affordable, hey, we're still talking almost $50,000. That's a lot of money, right? For a little convertible that, hey, how often are you going to be using the thing? A lot of people store them in the winter in the garage and bring them out in the summer. So if you are looking for one, those are the only two left that you can really find that are under 50 grand here in the United States. Well, here's a horror story. Be glad it didn't happen to you. Well, maybe it has if you own a Ford F-150, but a guy in Houston, Texas had a new Ford F-150, and it randomly triggers the brakes on the freeways in Houston. Guys I used to work with at CBS in Houston, they did a nice story. They drove with the guy, and lo and behold, they're going down the road, and it starts braking itself when it's on cruise control, right? A little bit. But then all of a sudden, it slams the brakes on. They come to a screeching halt on a freeway. Now, they did this test when there was no one around. They did a safe test, right? The guy's taking it to Ford, and they've had it for months now, and they can't figure out what's wrong. They did a bunch of stuff which didn't fix it, right? So now the dealer, Joe Myers Ford, is telling the guy, well, Ford's trying to figure out what they're going to do. You know what I say? Ford, stand behind your stinking products. This guy has a serious problem. It slams the brakes on a highway. He's using cruise control, right? Give him a new truck, and then take that crapper you sold him and have your guys work on it in Detroit to see what went wrong, because it can't be a one-off. There's probably other people it's happening to. But he's got a serious problem. Slams the brakes on a highway. Give him a brand new truck that works. And if that doesn't work, give him another one. Who knows? With their quality control, horrible Ford quality control, right? Give him a new truck. Don't say, well, we're working on it. Ford says they're going to try to figure out what's wrong. No. It's dangerous. Take that one back. You can't figure it out. Crush the thing. Melt it down and build another truck in case of the one you can't fix. And that's the problem with all these systems. It's adaptive cruise control, where, you know, it adjusts the cruise control where you're driving. When those things break, they're so complicated, even the guys at the Ford dealer don't know how to fix them. Well, now the EU, the European Union, is planning to ban the use of carbon fiber, because they say the carbon fiber creates nanoparticles and does pollution. Right? Well, okay, European Union, let's go a little bit further. You got to ban cars, because cars have rubber tires. You know what rubber tires do? They put out microparticles of rubber that may cause lung cancer, right? So it doesn't matter if you got a gas, diesel, or an electric car. And the electric cars actually wear the tires out faster, so they put more microparticles of pollution out there that we're breathing in, right? Comes to a point that sometimes these people get absurd. There's not that much carbon fiber used in building cars. It costs a lot of money, right? Mainly it's in race cars and crap like that, right? And how many race cars are out there, right? And then they say, well, if they break, carbon fiber pieces will go in the atmosphere. Like how much? Hardly any, right? I mean, these Europeans have kind of lost their noggins. They're always doing stuff that looks green. Is it actually green? Who knows? They're still trying to sue Google, because they see Google has a lot of money. Let's get some of their money. We'll sue them. We'll take them to court, right? Some of my videos, for example, if they're shown in Europe or England, then I pay a tax on that. They say, well, you're making money here. You just pay a tax on the Google videos you got there, right? So, hey, you know what I say to Europe? You guys have lost your mind, and now you're trying to ban carbon fiber, which has a very low usage to begin with. Well, here's a list of the 10 most bought cars in the world by the ultra-rich, and some of it might surprise you. Numero uno is Tesla, 4.7% of the ultra-rich bought Tesla. Maybe they want to mirror Elon, their hero. He's the ultra-rich, right? Now, number 2 is BMW. That's 2.4%. No surprise, snobs like driving those things around. Number 3 is Mercedes, which is only 1.9% of them. Right? Now, then comes Land Rover, no surprise, but it's dipped to 0.6%. And Audi, which is 1.2%. Toyota's in there, but it's such a small percentage, it doesn't count. They don't make that many really expensive cars, right? And then comes Ford, of all things. 4.1%. Fancy schmancy racy car things that only the ultra rich buy, but I guess there's some ultra rich that actually buy Fords. Guys like Warren Buffett, right? He drives old American cars. The last one I think he bought was a car that had hail damage because he got it cheaper, and he drives it for 10 years, then he buys another one, right? So maybe they're trying to follow him. Now, Lexus, it's 2.6%. Mercedes is 1.9%. So the rich would rather drive a Lexus than a Mercedes these days. Times are changing, right? Porsche's on there too, but it's only 0.4%. I would have thought it's higher, but the ultra-rich don't want to drive themselves around. They want a chauffeur, and it's kind of hard being chauffeured around a little Porsche, so they don't sell all that many of them. And the last one is an electric car company, Rivian, which is 0.3%. So now you know what the ultra-rich buy. Surprising Ford was in there. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.